$500,000. That was the demand that turned Rebecca and Zied's painful breakup into something much uglier, a public divorce war where love, money, sacrifice, and revenge became almost impossible to separate. Rebecca walked into court carrying bank records, work schedules, payment histories, receipts, and private messages. She looked prepared to prove that this marriage had cost her far more than heartbreak. Across the room, Zied looked stunned. To him, the number was not about fairness. It was punishment. He believed Rebecca wanted to make him pay for leaving her, embarrass him publicly, and make sure he walked away with nothing. But Rebecca told a completely different story. She claimed the money represented years of working long hours, supporting their home, defending their relationship, and carrying responsibilities that should have belonged to both of them. She believed Zied had accepted everything she provided while emotionally leaving the marriage long before he finally admitted it. And that is what makes this fictional storyline deeper than a shocking courtroom demand. Only days earlier, they were still living together. They were still sharing a home, paying bills, following routines, and pretending the marriage was damaged but stable. Then one argument exposed everything underneath. Zied looked at Rebecca and said, "You are not a real wife. My life with you is miserable, and I don't love you anymore." That sentence did not simply end an argument. It changed the meaning of their entire relationship. Rebecca immediately began questioning every sacrifice she had made. Zied began describing those same sacrifices as control. She saw herself as the person who kept the marriage alive. He saw himself as someone trapped inside a relationship that no longer felt loving. So, how did a private argument become a $500,000 court battle? Was Rebecca finally demanding accountability, or was she trying to put a price on rejection? And more importantly, had Zied already planned his exit before that argument ever started? Because the $500,000 demand was shocking, but what happened inside their home was much more revealing. Rebecca had just returned from a 16-hour shift. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and expecting the smallest amount of support. She did not need a perfect evening. She needed Zied to recognize that she had spent the entire day working. Instead, she walked into a home that already felt cold. Zied barely looked at her. His answers were short. His body language was distant, and the silence between them felt less like a temporary bad mood and more like a decision he had already made privately. At first, the argument appeared to be about ordinary things. They complained about dinner, household responsibilities, the lack of time they spent together, and how little they had communicated over the previous days. But this was never really about dinner. That was only the doorway into a much bigger conflict. When a relationship is already full of resentment, small problems stop being small. A late meal becomes proof that someone does not care. A long shift becomes proof that work matters more than the marriage. A dirty room becomes proof that one person is carrying everything alone. The argument was not about what had happened that night. It was about what both of them believed had been happening for years. Rebecca believed she was holding the relationship together through action. She worked. She paid bills. She solved practical problems. She protected the marriage when other people questioned it. In her mind, every exhausting shift was an expression of commitment. Zied did not see it that way. He believed the marriage had slowly turned into a financial arrangement. Rebecca provided stability, but he felt she no longer gave him enough time, affection, or emotional closeness. He did not want to be treated like another responsibility on her schedule. And this is where their relationship became dangerous. Rebecca saw sacrifice. Zied saw absence. Rebecca saw responsibility. Zied saw control. Rebecca believed she was carrying the marriage. Zied believed the marriage had stopped feeling like one. When two people both believe they are the only person making an effort, they stop communicating and start building cases against each other. Every disagreement becomes evidence. Every sacrifice becomes a weapon. Every old mistake is saved for the next argument. Rebecca wanted Zied to notice that she was tired. Zied wanted Rebecca to notice that he was unhappy. Neither one felt seen, and both of them believed their pain should have been obvious. Rebecca reminded him that she had been working for 16 hours. Zied responded by saying work was always her answer. Whenever he wanted to talk, she was tired. Whenever he wanted more time, she had another responsibility. Whenever he complained, she reminded him of what she had paid for. That accusation hit Rebecca hard because she did not believe she was controlling him. She believed she was stating the reality of their marriage. She had covered expenses. She had worked through exhaustion. She had defended Zied when people doubted his intentions. From Rebecca's point of view, gratitude was the minimum she deserved. But gratitude is not intimacy. And financial support cannot permanently cover emotional distance. That does not excuse the way Zied spoke to her. If he felt ignored, lonely, or disconnected, those feelings were valid subjects for a serious conversation. But instead of explaining his needs clearly, he turned his frustration into an attack on Rebecca's identity. "You're not a real wife." That was the emotional point of no return. Zied could have said, "I feel lonely." He could have said, "I miss the relationship we used to have." He could have said, "I don't feel emotionally connected to you anymore." Instead, he told Rebecca that she was not real in the role she had spent years trying to fulfill. That is why the statement hurt so deeply. Rebecca did not hear criticism. She heard erasure. She had spent years believing that love meant showing up through action. She worked when she was tired. She handled problems when things became stressful. She kept moving when the relationship became difficult. So when Zied told her she was not a real wife, she heard him say that none of those things counted. And viewers would probably be divided right here. Some fans would immediately defend Rebecca. They would say Zied was happy to accept the stability she provided, but the moment he wanted to leave, he acted as though her contributions meant nothing. Other viewers would likely say Rebecca had confused providing money with building emotional intimacy. They might argue that working hard does not automatically mean the other person feels loved. But even viewers who understand Zied's frustration would probably struggle to defend the wording. There is a major difference between explaining that a marriage feels empty and attacking the person who is standing in front of you. Rebecca asked him to take it back. She reminded him of the criticism she had faced for the relationship. She reminded him of the money she had spent, the hours she had worked, and the moments when she chose him despite pressure from other people. She wanted one thing from Zied: acknowledgement. Not even agreement. Just acknowledgement that she had tried. Zied refused. And that refusal mattered almost as much as the insult itself. People sometimes say terrible things during emotional arguments. The future of the relationship often depends on what happens afterward. Does the person recognize the damage? Do they apologize? Do they explain what they were actually trying to say? Zied did not soften the statement.
He stood by it.
In his mind, Rebecca had become more like a provider, manager, or roommate than a romantic partner. He believed the words were harsh but honest. The problem is that delayed honesty often arrives as cruelty. If Zied had felt this way for months, why had he remained silent? Why had he continued accepting Rebecca's support? Why had he waited until she returned from a 16-hour shift to reveal that he no longer respected her role in the marriage? That is the contradiction Rebecca could not ignore. She could have ended the conversation and walked away. Instead, she asked the one question that forced Zied to stop hiding behind complaints. "Do you still love me?" Zied hesitated, and that silence may have been more painful than an immediate answer. Rebecca watched him, waiting for reassurance. Even after being insulted, part of her probably wanted him to say he was angry, overwhelmed, or confused. She wanted proof that the marriage was wounded but still alive. Then Zied said he did not love her anymore. That confession did more than end the argument. It created a new timeline. Rebecca was no longer only asking why Zied wanted to leave. She was asking when he had already left emotionally. Had his feelings changed weeks earlier? Months earlier? Had he been pretending everything was fine while privately preparing to end the marriage? And if he had stopped loving her long before that night, why had he continued letting Rebecca believe they were building a future together? That is where heartbreak turns into suspicion. Rebecca began looking backward at every recent conversation, every distant expression, every moment Zied avoided intimacy, every time he seemed emotionally absent. Suddenly, those moments no longer looked random. They looked like warning signs. Zied claimed the marriage had been unhappy for a long time. According to him, Rebecca refused to recognize the problems because she believed money and responsibility were enough. Rebecca saw that explanation as convenient. She believed Zied had accepted support while quietly planning his escape. She began questioning whether his affection had ever been genuine or whether he remained in the relationship because leaving would have been difficult. This is what ugly breakups do. They do not only destroy the present. They rewrite the past. Every happy memory becomes suspicious. Every sacrifice becomes evidence. Every old disagreement is pulled forward and given a darker meaning. Rebecca started asking whether Zied had ever truly valued her. Zied started asking whether Rebecca had ever loved him without trying to manage his choices. Neither one was searching for understanding anymore. They were searching for proof that the other person had always been the problem. Rebecca raised her voice and listed everything she believed she had lost in the marriage: time, energy, money, opportunities, peace of mind, and years she could never get back. She believed Zied was walking away after receiving the best of what she had to offer, leaving her with the cost. Zied accused Rebecca of turning every financial contribution into emotional leverage. He told her she could not purchase love or loyalty. According to him, whenever they argued, Rebecca reminded him of what she had paid for, as though support created a debt he could never repay. That accusation completely changed the meaning of Rebecca's generosity. When Rebecca paid for something, she believed she was investing in the marriage. Zied believed she was creating control. Rebecca saw herself as dependable. Zied saw her as dominant. And the uncomfortable truth is that both versions could contain something real. Rebecca may have genuinely wanted to support their home, but she may also have expected that support to guarantee appreciation, loyalty, and influence. Zied may have genuinely felt controlled, but he also benefited from the stability Rebecca provided while failing to communicate how unhappy he had become. This is why there is no clean hero in this conflict. Rebecca's pain does not automatically make every decision reasonable. Zied's unhappiness does not excuse his cruelty. The argument grew louder because neither person was willing to admit even a small amount of responsibility. Rebecca wanted appreciation. Zied wanted freedom. Rebecca believed he owed her gratitude. Zied believed she owed him emotional space. Then Zied shouted, "I'm divorcing you." Rebecca did not beg. She said, "Fine. I want a divorce too. I can't live with you anymore." On the surface, Rebecca's response sounded powerful. She refused to let Zied see her plead for a marriage he had already rejected. But emotionally, the response was also self-protection. Zied had told her she was not a real wife. He had said he no longer loved her. Agreeing to the divorce allowed Rebecca to reclaim a small amount of control. She could not stop Zied from leaving, but she could refuse to look abandoned. The danger was that both of them were making permanent decisions in the middle of temporary emotional chaos. By the next morning, Rebecca was no longer speaking with the same confidence. The anger had faded, and the reality of the breakup had started to settle in. Part of her hoped Zied would apologize. She may not have been ready to forgive him, but she needed proof that the relationship had mattered. Zied remained cold. He began separating his belongings, moving personal items, and dividing small parts of their life together. Then Rebecca learned that he had already contacted someone about starting the divorce process. That detail changed the entire conflict. To Rebecca, Zied's speed proved that the decision had not started during the argument. She believed he had already considered leaving and was simply waiting for a moment that would justify it. Zied denied planning anything in advance. He claimed he moved quickly because Rebecca had also said she wanted the marriage to end. But emotionally, their statements were not equal. Zied demanded divorce after admitting that he had already stopped loving Rebecca. Rebecca agreed after being humiliated. One statement came from emotional withdrawal. The other came from emotional defense. Their home quickly became divided. Separate rooms. Separate finances. Separate conversations. They spoke only when necessary, and even simple exchanges carried suspicion. Then Rebecca started gathering records. Work schedules. Bank statements. Transfers. Household expenses. Messages. Receipts. Anything that could prove how much she had contributed. That was the moment grief became strategy. Rebecca was no longer only asking why Zied had stopped loving her. She was preparing to calculate what the marriage had cost. And that calculation eventually became $500,000. Rebecca claimed she had financially supported the relationship while losing time, opportunities, emotional stability, and years of her life. She believed the marriage had benefited Zied far more than it benefited her. From her perspective, he received stability, support, and a partner willing to keep working. She received rejection. The $500,000 demand represented more than direct expenses inside this fictional storyline. Rebecca connected it to the money she claimed to have contributed, shared assets she believed she helped build, lost opportunities, and the emotional damage she believed the marriage caused. Zied called the number ridiculous. He believed Rebecca was turning heartbreak into a financial weapon. To him, she was not asking for reimbursement. She was asking for revenge. This is where public opinion would become completely divided. Some fans would feel Rebecca was finally standing up for herself. They would argue that Zied accepted her support for years, then tried to leave without acknowledging what she had done. Those viewers would see the $500,000 as a symbol of accountability, even if they questioned the exact number. Other viewers would say Rebecca was trying to place a price tag on love. They would argue that money spent during a marriage does not automatically become a loan when the relationship ends. A section of the audience would likely criticize both of them. They would say Zied was emotionally checked out, cruel, and willing to benefit from Rebecca's support while secretly resenting her. But they would also say Rebecca had started treating sacrifice like ownership, as though working harder gave her the right to control how Zied felt or whether he could leave. And that is the most uncomfortable part of the story. Rebecca may be correct that Zied benefited from the marriage. Zied may be correct that Rebecca used those benefits during arguments. Both things can be true. Before court, Zied began building his own defense. He presented messages where Rebecca allegedly reminded him of what she had paid for. He argued that many of the expenses were voluntary decisions made during their marriage. He claimed Rebecca controlled the finances and used support to make him feel permanently indebted. This was not only a legal argument. It attacked Rebecca's entire identity. Rebecca wanted to be seen as the woman who held everything together. Zied wanted that same behavior to be seen as control. Rebecca called it sacrifice. Zied called it pressure. Rebecca called it loyalty. Zied called it obligation. By the time they reached court, they were no longer debating what had happened. They were debating what every moment of the marriage meant. Rebecca entered with documents and refused to look at Zied. That body language told its own story. She did not appear to want emotional closure anymore. She wanted recognition. She wanted someone to confirm that the years she had given were real and valuable. Zied appeared calm until the $500,000 demand was formally introduced. Then his confidence changed. He accused Rebecca of trying to destroy him financially and damage his reputation. Rebecca described the 16-hour shifts. She explained how often she worked, how much responsibility she carried, and how alone she felt while doing it. She presented herself as someone who continued fighting for a marriage that Zied had already abandoned emotionally. Zied argued that Rebecca could not place a price on every decision she had willingly made. According to him, marriage involved shared choices, not one person secretly keeping a bill and presenting it when a relationship ended. Then their private insults became part of the court battle. Rebecca repeated Zied's words. "You are not a real wife." Zied admitted saying it, but claimed he had spoken during an emotional argument. He said the wording was cruel, but the feeling behind it was real. That explanation may have made his position worse. Saying something cruel in anger does not erase the cruelty. And admitting that the statement reflected a deeper belief suggested Rebecca's fear was correct. Zied had been emotionally disconnected for much longer than he admitted. Rebecca finally explained that the money was not the most painful part. The deepest wound was feeling disposable. She believed she had spent years proving her commitment, only for Zied to walk away as though none of it mattered. That was the real emotional center of the case. Rebecca did not only want money. She wanted Zied, the court, and everyone watching to acknowledge that her sacrifices were real. Zied wanted acknowledgement of something different. He wanted it understood that Rebecca's sacrifices did not give her ownership over his future. The court was now facing a difficult question. Was this a legitimate financial dispute, or had it become a revenge battle? Was Rebecca trying to recover real losses, or punish Zied for rejecting her? Was Zied escaping a controlling marriage, or avoiding responsibility for the support he had accepted? Just when Rebecca appeared to have the stronger emotional argument, Zied introduced one final document.